I bought the weirdest track saw on the market, but is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I've been called weird most of my life, and I'm okay with that. Let's go. The DeWALT Track Saw is different from other track saws that we'll compare it to today, the Rigid, the Milwaukee, and the Festool, but that doesn't necessarily make it a bad saw, it just makes it different. And different isn't always bad, although there are some things I really wish weren't made the way they are on this saw. Let's talk about it. This is a cordless track saw. It comes with a 6 amp hour, 60 volt, flex volt DeWALT battery. DeWALT claims that this saw is as powerful as a corded saw. It says so right there on the box. This is the most powerful cordless track saw I've ever used. This bad boy got some power. It cut through almost 2-inch thick walnut like it was nothing. It didn't bog, it didn't give any indication that it was under load at all, which is extremely surprising to me because the Festool and the Milwaukee bogged a little bit in the middle of the cut. The exact same board, exact same length of cut, this went right through it. And out of the box, just the way it's set, cut perfectly square. Now I also wanted to cut 45 just to see how accurate it was. Put this on a 45-degree angle, and we'll talk about how it is to set that in a minute. But once I got it set, perfect 45-degree angle on the cut. No issues at all. And of course, cutting sheet goods was also no trouble for this saw. So that is a positive. Another thing I really like is the fact that it comes with a swiveling dust port, which means you can just kind of move that anywhere you need it so that your dust hose doesn't get really bound up. And the fact that the outside diameter fits most shop vacs or adapters, and the inside adapter fits my Festool dust extractor, which I like. And it goes far enough in there that you don't have to worry about it slipping out. Another good thing about this saw is the dust extraction is pretty good. It's on par with the Festool and the Milwaukee. I didn't see really any difference there. I did slap this cover on there. Now during the walnut cut, I did accidentally forget to turn on the dust extractor, which clogged up this, and I had to clear that out. Once I cleared that out, everything rolled right along. I do enjoy the fact that this has anti-kickback in a couple of different ways. Number one, it has a riving knife on there, which prevents the stock you're cutting from pinching the blade as you make the cut. I do like that. The Milwaukee has it, the Rigid has it, so those are good features to have. It also has an anti-kickback in the form of a tension. So there's a knob right here in the center that you twist or unlock, and once it's unlocked, it will prevent the saw from moving backwards. That's a good feature to have. This saw does have a brushless motor. That's good, more power, more battery life, and it is a variable speed. It goes from 1 to number 7. I typically just leave it on 7 or whatever the max is and go. I don't ever really turn it down. I'm not really sure why I would need that. If you do, let me know. And before we get into the weird, let's talk about how well this thing is made. This is a very top quality tool. I don't think you'll have any trouble with the build quality of this saw. This housing is some type of metal or alloy. The base is also a metal or alloy, so you don't really have to worry about that. Now some of the more budget saws have plastic in these parts, and that causes a lot of deflection. This does not have deflection at all. In other words, it doesn't deflect off of the 90-degree once you tighten these two little knobs down. Perfect. I mean, it's just a good, well-made tool, and out of the box it feels really nice. Like the heft is not overly heavy. I thought it would be heavier with this big 60 volts, not overly heavy, and it just feels like a good quality DeWALT tool. If you like DeWALT tools, you'll be pleased with this one. And if you'd like to get my first impressions on what I think about these tools and others, I have another channel that I just started called The Outlaw Effect, where I'm going to start posting tool reviews, not just woodworking, and also unboxings, first impressions, tool news, that kind of stuff. If you love tools as much as I do, you got to go check it out. Link in the description and in the pinned comment. Another good thing is it comes with a well-made storage box. Now, I used to think this stuff was silly, the pack outs, the sustainers. These are nice for tool storage. It keeps your shop organized, and if you have to transport this, it keeps your tool from getting damaged. I like that. This box is not nearly as big as the Festool sustainer or the Milwaukee pack out. This thing kind of looks like Spud Webb up against Shaquille O'Neal. Like, it's a giant difference, but I do like that this is kind of smaller because it's more compact. It doesn't take up as much space either in your truck, van, or your shop. And it's a solid box. Nothing wrong with it. I prefer the pack outs, but this is a really well-made box. It's a T-stack system also, so you can connect it to your other T-stack stuff. Now for the weird. Get a little weird here. This thing is, it's a 60-volt battery. This battery will fit my 20-volt DeWALT atomic tools. In other words, my impact, my drill, this fits on there fine. But the 20-volt batteries that I already have doesn't fit on here. I just think that's weird. Why does this fit those and those don't fit this? I don't know. But I do like the power that this provides this saw, so I'm not really that worried about it. And it comes with the fast charger, so that's okay. As long as it comes with its own charger, I can charge this up, no problem. But if you think you're just gonna buy this tool without this big 60-volt battery, it ain't gonna work unless you already have some of those. Now for the weird on this track saw, first and foremost is this track. It's weird. Isn't it weird? Why? Because it has that single rib down the middle, and you can use the saw from either side. You can cut on the right side of the track or the left side, doesn't matter. So whichever way you want to throw the track on there, it really doesn't matter. Now I don't know that I've ever had an issue with using the other tracks that are only one-sided. This looks like a solution looking for a problem. Like it just doesn't, there's no reason for it, but it works. The problem is this is not a standard track. In other words, Festool, Milwaukee, Makita, PowerTech, you can interchange accessories on all of those tracks if you own multiples. Most people don't. The good thing is there are accessories for this track, unlike the rigid track when it came out. You couldn't get any aftermarket accessories. TSO sells a track square for this specific track for DeWALT, so you can actually pick up some of those if you need, better accessories. Speaking of accessories, I typically get these with every track saw. You've probably seen them on my Festool as well as on the Milwaukee, and that is these arbor covers. I think they really help with the dust collection, and I like to put them on every saw. They're easy to put on and off, and my friend over at Woodworks, I'll link to in the description, has both black and yellow for this saw and different colors for other saws that you can put on there. They're easily on and off, and that really helps improve the dust collection in my opinion. He also has these end guards that slip right on the end of the track, and that prevents your cord or your hoses from getting damaged when it drags over the end of that sharp edge of that track. He also has these little covers that prevent them from getting damaged during transport or storage. Check him out. Another weird thing is how this thing plunges. I guess I kind of buried the lead there. This thing plunges weirder than any other track saw. Most track saws just kind of come down. This kind of goes forward and then kind of circles down. It's kind of weird. Does it matter? No, it didn't. It plunged just fine. I actually went right into the middle of a piece of MDF and plunged cut, and it does the plunge cut about as well as any other I've used. I don't really mind it. It works. This saw has the springs aren't too tight, they're not too loose, so everything plunges well. It's a well-made tool. I don't think you'll have any issues there. It's just weird. Another weird is how you adjust the depth of cut. It works fine. There's no issues there. It moves really easily and it tightens down easily. So the depth of cut adjustment is good. I just prefer the way it is on the Festool and the Milwaukee and the rigid, where it's a push button and move, and then you can just let go and set and forget type thing. This is more, just takes a little bit extra to move it and put it in place. Not a huge deal, but it's weird. Every track saw has a way to be adjusted to the track it's on, so it's not all wampy-jawed. It's tight to the track, but not too tight that it won't move. These two knobs on this track saw are for that purpose, but you have to have a wrench or an Allen key or a screwdriver to be able to loosen that and then tighten it down. That's not a huge deal, but it's annoying because most other track saws, you don't need a tool to loosen those and then snug it up and then tighten it down. Once you put it on the track and tighten it up, it's fine. You'll never have to adjust it again for the most part. As far as changing the blade goes, I don't like this. I wish they would change this. It's weird because you have to push this button and then you have to plunge it down, and then this button in here you have to turn around and then it locks. So it's like a 3-step process, and it took me a little bit to figure this out. I didn't realize that that's how you had to do it at first, so that can be frustrating if you don't know. Once you figure it out, it's not an issue, it's just frustrating, because you'll forget by the time you change the blade. The next thing I don't like is there is no anti-tip on this track saw. The Milwaukee as well as the rigid both have anti-tip. There's little metal doohickeys that come out and stick into the track that it's already cut into that track, and that prevents, when you go to 45 degrees, it prevents it from tipping over. I do like that, and I wish that the DeWALT had it. Before we get into the major differences between these 4 track saws, which most people are probably going to be looking at, I want to talk about one more thing I don't care for in the DeWALT track saw. It's the way you have to adjust the angles. Number one, there is no positive stops on this saw. So you go from 0 all the way to 47 without any positive stops. All 3 of these other saws have positive stops, especially at the more common angles, like 22.5 and especially 45. The way you have to set the 45 on this saw is awkward if you want to get it right. Because that angle indicator is kind of not perfect. It's just kind of a flat piece of plastic. You don't really know where you're at. As a matter of fact, to get a 45 to cut, I have to put it at about 46. And I say about because it may take some tweaking. Battery's off. I have to plunge it all the way down. Make sure the battery's off when you do this. Make sure your depth stop's not set. You push it all the way through. Whenever I get it to work, push it all the way through. Now I have to hold it down. Take a small square and check the 45 with the blade. Huh? Come on. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're in the market for the DeWALT Track Saw, you've probably looked at the Rigid and maybe the Milwaukee as they line up kind of close in price, especially if you have to add batteries, extra tracks, etc. This one's going to run you about $600. Sometimes you can get them on sale for a little cheaper. Be sure to text deals to this number you see on the screen because if they go on a really good sale, I'll let you know. These are kind of similar style, similar priced. So depending on your budget and what tool you like is one you're going to go with. But I will throw Festool in here to let you know what is different and the same about these tools. First and foremost, all 4 of these track saws are well-made tools. You're not going to have any issues with the build quality of them. They're all metal. They don't have any deflection in them as far as the 90 degree. So they're well-made. What's different, number one, is the adjustments on all of these. On this one, Rigid, you'll see that it does have on-track and off-track depths, so you don't have to worry about trying to figure that out. The DeWALT does not have that. Well, the Festool indicates that with either this line or this line as far as on-track or off. And then the Milwaukee has it as well, on-track, off-track. The Rigid has the push button, like I indicated earlier, as well as the Festool and the Milwaukee. The Milwaukee and Festool both have fine tuning, so if you get close to the depth of cut, you can twist this little knob on the Festool or this one on top of the Milwaukee, and that'll kind of dial in your cuts. Neither the Rigid or the DeWALT have that. As far as the angle indicator goes, you can see on the DeWALT that it's just kind of, I don't really know what it's pointing at. Is it the middle? Is it the top? Not exactly sure. Whereas on the Rigid, you can see that it's clearly defined, that this is where it is. On the Milwaukee, you can see it's a nice red point, so you know where that's at. And then of course on the Festool, it is also indicated by a good, nice line. So you don't really have to worry about where your angle is other than on this DeWALT. Now the one thing missing on the Rigid that the DeWALT has is variable speed. The Rigid is one speed, it's either all or nothing. And this one you can dial the speed down if you need to. Now comparing the plunging action on the DeWALT versus the other ones, you can see it kind of goes forward and then down. Again, it didn't bother me, it worked just fine. On the Festool, you get the more standard plunge where it just goes straight down. You will notice that the Festool doesn't have a riving knife. This is an anti-kickback feature. If this loses contact with the track, it stops that blade. Where all of the other ones do have a riving knife. The Rigid also is a more standard plunging action. You will see that the riving knife actually operates or articulates differently or separately from the saw or from the saw blade. And the same goes for the Milwaukee. It articulates exactly or very similar to the Rigid. As far as power and dust collection goes on all of these, the dust collection is very similar on all of them in my opinion. You're not going to see much difference on any of these. They all do a pretty good job with dust collection, especially with that arbor cover. Now power, there is a major difference in my opinion in power on this DeWALT. I think it is way more powerful than any of these other ones, Festool and Milwaukee included. It just did a better job at cutting that almost 2-inch thick piece of walnut. The Rigid bogged a little more than the Milwaukee and the Festool, but it still cut through just fine. I just think in this 4 lineup, this one is probably the weakest of the 4, but not saying it's too weak to cut. It will cut, it's just not as stout as these others. Now when you compare these 3, the DeWALT is the most powerful. Hands down in my opinion, this bad boy got some power. I like it. I like it a lot actually. The Milwaukee and the Festool are a close second. They're both about the same. Most people probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference in these two's cut power. As far as tracks go, Rigid has its own thing. It's a proprietary track. Festool and Milwaukee tracks will work together. You could use a Festool on a Milwaukee track and vice versa. And then the DeWALT track is also a proprietary track. I really wish they would get away from this proprietary track. I can't say proprietary many more times. I wish they would get away from these tracks that are each their own thing, but it is what it is, and if you're not really worried about having multiple track saws, it's probably not going to matter unless you really want to accessorize them out with parallel guides or track squares, etc. But there are those type attachments available for this track, and I'll link those in the description if you're interested. So if you're considering this DeWALT to purchase, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's got plenty of power. There are some weirdness, as I described in the video, and there's some things I didn't care for. Some of those are personal preferences, and some of those are going to annoy most people. But it's still a very good tool at a pretty good price. You compare the rigid saw, which I think is the best track saw, for under $400 if you have batteries, then this is the next step in line at about $600 minus some discounts you can find sometimes. So at $600, this is a pretty good deal if you know what you're getting. One thing I would suggest is picking up an extra track. That way you don't have to move that track and you can tie them together, because just having one track is annoying. So it doesn't matter what track saw you go with, make sure you have at least 2 full-length tracks to be able to cut at least 8 foot of stock, like plywood, MDF, etc. You ever felt like you didn't belong? Like you were different? Like everybody else was kind of the same, but you kind of just didn't go with the crowd? It's kind of the way me and this DeWALT Track Saw have felt our whole lives. I've never really felt like I belonged most places I've been, and that's kind of the way this track saw is. It looks different than the rest, it operates different from the rest, but it doesn't make it a bad track saw, right? If you're still on the fence and you don't want to click the link in the description to go buy this just yet, you should check out the rigid track saw review or the Milwaukee track saw review right there. If you click one of those boxes, you'll get a big old virtual fist bump. Let me know what you think about this saw. That's all.